This is the WGBH Forum Network.
I am the substitute teacher for Dick Stormont today, and in honor of that, would you please not pass notes or chew gum so we can maintain discipline. This is a special week. This is the week of the 9/11 attack, and since that time, the American spirit has been well exemplified. And throughout history on this day, the spirit of both the United States and Great Britain has been exemplified as well. For it was on this date that General Pershing was given a victory parade in New York City following World War I. And it was on this day that the Battle of Britain in the air was won by Great Britain, standing alone amongst all the free countries of the world in 1940. We welcome to the podium today Her Majesty's General Consul at Atlanta, Martin Rickerd. In honor of his presence, we'll be playing the British national anthem, followed by the singing of the United States national anthem. Frank Boggs will be leading the music with Kathy Adams, and our invocation will be given by Jim Golden right after that.
You know the tune of the British national anthem. We sing the words, "My country, 'tis of thee." And so when we were talking about this, we wanted to play it, and yet I said, well, we'll all think we're playing "My country, 'tis of thee." So with the help of our distinguished guest, I'm going to try to sing the national anthem. Would you all please keep your faces straight as I do this? God save our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen. God save the Queen, send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the Queen. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light, oh, the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly seen, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Let's bow our heads in prayer. Two great nations, Lord, Great Britain and the United States of America. Two great peoples, Lord, who predominantly worship God, side by side, arm in arm, working together for peace in today's world. So much of America's heritage has come from our speaker's country. Even his traditional national anthem, which you heard just sing, rings with God's words, God save our glorious Queen. O Lord, our God, arise, scatter thine enemies, and make them fall. On thee our hopes we fix, God save us all. So close and comparable to our beloved American hymn, My country, 'tis of thee. Our fathers, God to thee, author of liberty, to thee we sing. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might, great God, our King. So, at Rotary today in Atlanta, with God on both sides, Great Britain and the United States of America, let us continue the pursuit of happiness and goodwill, striving always to be at your side, God, praying and asking for your continued blessings. God bless America, and God bless Great Britain. Amen.
Thank you, Frank, and thanks, Kathy, and Jim, thank you for that special prayer. We'll get back together again in a few minutes. You know, in a second, I'm going to use my naval voice, ringing the bell here a few times. We are excited about having guests and visitors here today, and we enjoy having you with us in our comradeship. And Bev Jones will introduce you and tell us who you are.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome, everybody. This is an exciting day. It's a sad day in history, but it's a good day here in Atlanta. And with all these guests and fellow Rotarians, there was this country doctor who was telling about one of his patients, and he said he came in, and he said, "Doc, I want to tell you what happened out there in your parlor." He said, "I seen a man over in the corner. I took a long look at him, and I knowed him. And I figured he must know me, so I decided to check it out, and I walked toward the middle of the room. He came up, met me in the middle of the room. But you know what, Doc? It weren't neither one of us. But this is a good time to mix and mingle and get to know each other. That's one of the purposes of Rotary, you know, is fellowship and friendship. That'll register with some of you when you get in the car. We're glad to have these people as guests today. Adam Fuller, the guest of John McCoskey. Are you here, Adam? Good for you. We all came from Adam, didn't we? All right, Lois Adler, who is the guest of Mark Adler from Houston, Texas. He's in banking. Louis, would you stand, please? Good to see you. You parting your hair right down the middle like you ought to. All right, Sarah Baymig. Sarah Baymig, who is the guest of David Baymig. And David is Jenny Pruitt's son-in-law, right? So that makes Sarah, you her daughter, right? Granddaughter, okay. We're glad to have you here. She's a student. And then Mac McKinney is Willard McBurney's guest from Portsmouth, Ohio, and is now the general manager of the Capital City Club. Matt, would you stand? Good to see you over there. And then Charles Merriweather has a couple of guests. One is Addison Merriweather. He is with Commercial Real Estate. And Nick Hoffman, Charles Merriweather's guest from Atlanta, the Hoffman and Company. Would you two stand? Thank you. It's good to have you. And then Barbara Langford is the guest of Jim Langford. Barbara? Where are you? Right back there. Thank you. And then Harriet Hoskin Abrahal. Harriet Hoskin Abrahal, the guest of Milton Clipper, hometown Atlanta. She's with Public Broadcasting, WABE, I guess, right? It's good to have you with us. Beg your pardon? Oh, okay, good. Both of them. Fine. All right, anybody we've overlooked, will you? Let's welcome these guests. This old codger was known in the community, and he'd been around a long time, and the boys just went up one day with a great deal of nerve, and they said, called his name, said, "How old are you?" He said, "Boys, my age is not any of my business. Not any of my business." I hope you feel that way about your age. These are our birthday boys and girls. John Adderhole. John? He didn't make it. David Blackshear. Huh? Oh, good gracious alive. Yeah, the ones that are marked off here. I'm sorry. All right. Age is none of my business. All right. Sid Harris. Sid? All right, stand up over there, Sid. Joe Hensley. Joe? Oh, Joe couldn't make it either. All right, Jimmy Humphreys. Jimmy? All right. And John Imlay. I saw John outside, didn't I? Oh, here you are, John. Glenn Jackson. All right, Glenn. Michael Cano. I got you wrong. I got your name wrong. Keogh. Here he is. With Coca-Cola, no doubt, right? I got you. And then Buddy Lipsy. Buddy? Atta boy. Let's welcome them. I mean, greet them on that.
This morning when I was having breakfast, I spilled coffee on the newspaper, and it sort of leaked through to a page of the newspaper that I never read, and it's the horoscope section. So for those of you who just had your birthdays, I think you'd like to know what your horoscope is today. The moon in your sign should settle your mood nicely, and by the afternoon, a very positive influence from Jupiter could be good news. We'll see what Jupiter does to the stock market this afternoon, Bev. You know. Our next effort here is to recognize Robbie Lyle, who is our exchange student from Scotland. He did make it. I know he's there. Robbie is from Edinburgh, and as you can tell, birthdays are a great thing here, so we hope you stay around with us for the next year, where you're studying at Oglethorpe, and I understand you're taking history and a couple of other classes, so we welcome you with us. Bob Watkins will now give a tribute to Marty Ferguson.
It's my pleasure and privilege to give this tribute to Marty Westlake. Martha Marty Westlake Ferguson was born in St. Louis, Missouri on the February the 5th, on 9 April 1938. And she died and passed away on February 5th, 2007. She joined our club in 1987 under Frank Mayer's leadership with 4 other prominent Rotarians, ladies, and started where we could join and have ladies members of our club. She joined under the classification of Red Cross, manager of the Atlanta chapter. Her club involvement was on the membership committee, the old classification committee. Some thoughts about Marty are from Alan King, who's here today. Marty had a terrific attitude and outlook on life and exhibited her famous sense of humor. Yes, she was laughing, even though she was in constant pain. Marty was a consummate professional, an unselfish giver, and supporter of the nonprofit ALS, United Way, and the Diabetes Association of Atlanta. For my wife, Karen, Marty was both mom and dad to her children, Kathy and Bill. Life was good, but life was hard. Her children said that the only thing Mom knew how to cook was rice casserole. She was dubbed Queen Mother of Casseroles. As CEO of the Atlanta Red Cross, She had many of our Rotarians on our board. Collier Ross, John Clendenin were just a few. What Marty accomplished for the Red Cross would take a couple of hours to tell. She set the standard for all Red Cross CEOs. Marty's marriage to Rotarian George Ferguson was made in heaven. Sadly, it did not last. George died in March of 2001. He was CEO of our Atlanta Red Cross chapter before Marty took up the reins in 1992. During these times, we were blessed with having the national head of Red Cross, Jean Dyson, and Marty as members. Jean is sitting with her children, and I would like to introduce them, Kathy and John Westlake. Bill Westlake. John and Kathy Westlake had children, Natalie and John Mark. Bill and Sherry Westlake have their children, Sydney and Amelia. Please rise for a moment of silence.
Well, we have the pleasure of a new member introduction today. So Warren Jobe will be introducing Larry Shaw.
Thank you, Alex. A little trivia about Oglethorpe University before I introduce Larry. Larry is the 16th president of Oglethorpe University. Oglethorpe University has been represented in the Rotary Club of Atlanta by its president since 1968. One former president is here today and has almost perfect attendance. He's about to reach 30 years of perfect attendance. That's Manning Patilla, whom you all know. And there are a number of trustees, including Larry's sponsors, Harold Hanson, Jack Gwynn, also trustees Milton Clipper, Chuck Knapp is a trustee at Oglethorpe University, and George Goodwin is a trustee emeritus. So the club is well represented by the Oglethorpe connection. Lawrence M. Shaw was elected 16th president of Oglethorpe University, and he assumed his duties in June of 2005. Born in Manhattan, Larry grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. He graduated with honors from Swarthmore College in 1975 and went on to earn his Juris Doctor degree in 1978 from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Larry practiced law as a trial attorney for the next 7 years, specializing in civil rights litigation with a focus on children's rights and public assistance issues. In 1990, he returned to his alma mater, Swarthmore College, and served for 15 years, leaving as vice president for administration to become president of Oglethorpe University. While at Swarthmore, Larry was awarded a doctorate in higher education from the University of Pennsylvania, nearby in Philadelphia. And from 2003 until 2005, in addition to his duties at Swarthmore, he served as co-director of the University of Pennsylvania's Executive Doctorate Program and as an adjunct faculty member at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education. In September of 2005, only a few months after Larry had joined Oglethorpe University, he led our students to a Hurricane Katrina relief effort in partnership with Angel Flight of Georgia, helping to supply almost 300 missions to the affected communities on the Gulf Coast. In March of 2006, he led a group of 26 students to New Orleans for Oglethorpe's first alternative spring break program. As a part of his inauguration celebration in April of 2006, Larry instituted a day of service at Oglethorpe, leading more than 300 students, faculty, alumni, and trustees in various projects at Garden Hills Elementary School in coordination with the Hands-On Atlanta people. After that day of community service, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution referred to Larry as a, quote, down-to-earth academic. Under his leadership and following up on these community service endeavors, Oglethorpe recently opened the Center for Civic Engagement, connecting our students to the city of Atlanta and beyond in volunteer, curricular, civic, and cultural projects. In addition to his duties at Oglethorpe, which are awesome, Larry currently serves on the board of the Atlanta Local Education Fund, is vice chair of the board of Project Grad. He is a member of Hands-On Network's Corporate Council and an executive committee member of the Atlanta Regional Council for Higher Education. Larry and his wife, Betty Londergan, have 4 children and reside on Mabry Road here in Atlanta. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our newest member, Larry Shaw.
Larry, on behalf of the 475 members of this club and the thousands of Rotarians around the world, welcome to Rotary. Oglethorpe is a great part of Atlanta, and we look forward to your joining us and representing a great institution. I have here your Rotary pen and a paperweight with a 4-way test. Welcome to Rotary. Thank you. One of the great outreach programs of this Rotary Club is the prayer breakfast, and Glenn Jackson will now give us a few brief comments and announcements.
We are now just 17 days away from our prayer breakfast, which is the 10th annual breakfast for our club, which is an initiative of Atlanta Rotary. If you have not purchased a table or a ticket, we still have room for you. If you've purchased a table, please remember to fill the table. We want to maximize the capacity of our room and make sure every table is filled. The morning of the 27th of September is when the breakfast will occur at 7:30 in the morning at the Hyatt downtown. And our committee's been working since January to make sure that this event is truly and profoundly inspirational. We have Ambassador Jim Laney as our speaker. He'll give the keynote address. Tom Key will be performing from To Kill a Mockingbird, which has just kicked off at Theatrical Outfit. He'll be giving the courtroom scene from that Pulitzer Prize-winning book, which has been turned into a play by Tom Key. Frank Boggs and the Georgia Festival Chorus have some fabulous numbers that they've picked out. And as always, David Duke has put together a beautiful, beautiful video that will move us in many ways. In addition, we've added 2 additional twists to our breakfast, and actually kind of two elements that I think will be particularly special. We have a colonel from the United States Army just back from Afghanistan who will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance, Colonel Mike Dugan. He spent 4 years in Afghanistan. Joe Hinesley has graciously provided a room for him and his family the night before. Secondly, the Norman Rockwell Foundation has provided us a picture from Rockwell's 4 Liberties series, which appeared in the Saturday Evening Post in 1943. The painting will be on our cover for the program, and I think it'll set a very nice tone for our morning. Please continue to pray for our committee as we work towards all our final touches on this event, and I'll see you there. Thanks.
It is the tradition of this club that the presiding officer introduce speakers from the diplomatic corps. It is my honor to do that today. But first, here is a quiz for your meeting. What do the following countries have in common? The United States, Germany, Belgium, Italy, United Kingdom. About adding Malaysia, Singapore. Add to that Barbados, Côte d'Ivoire, Liberia, Niger. And finally, add Burkina Faso. There may be 2 or 3 of you that think Burkina Faso is a small town over in Alabama, but to point out to you that it is actually a landlocked nation in West Africa with Mali to the north and Togo to the south. It is unfortunately probably about as well known as Appalachian State was 2 weeks ago. So what do these countries all have in common? Well, our speaker today, Martin Rickerd, has, as Her Majesty's Consul General in Atlanta, has served in all of these nations over the past 35 years as a member of Her Majesty's diplomatic service. But while he has served in all of these various locations around the globe, he has also worked at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in London in a variety of positions. He has been head of the International Energy Section, head of the North American team, assigned to the Standard Chartered Bank for 2 years, and oversaw arrangements for President Bush's state visit in 2003. The duties of a consul general are particularly important for the local communities like Atlanta around the globe that international cooperation and understanding really begin. The consul general is up close and personal with businesses. The consul general is up close and personal in explaining country policies. And the consul general is also up close and personal in creating a better understanding of international cultures. Well, I sure hope so, because I've never understood how cricket works anyway. He has been appointed a member of the Royal Victorian Order and an officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, both highly prestigious awards in Her Majesty's diplomatic service. We are honored to have as our speaker today Her Majesty's Consul General at Atlanta and fellow Rotary member Martin Rickerd.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction, Alec. I've got my tea with me. Well, what passes for tea, of course. It's a privilege to belong to this Rotary Club and an honour to speak to you today. I want to start by recognising somebody who isn't here, and that is my father, who passed away about 7 years ago. He was a long-time member of Rotary in the UK, and I think he'd be pretty proud to see his little lad here today. Now, tomorrow, as has been mentioned, is a rather sad anniversary for a lot of reasons. But it also marks 35 years since I joined the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in London. That's what it looks like inside. Not many people see the inside of the Foreign Office. It's not all that grand. I have to say my own office was not in that picture, as you might imagine. But in the 35 years since I joined the Foreign Office in 1972, we've had 14 foreign secretaries. There they are. You may recognise some of them. At least 3 of them went on to become Prime Minister, and one of them still may, the one in the bottom right. And we've had 7 Prime Ministers. You will recognise all of those, I would imagine. And we've only had 1 Queen. Oh, hang on, that's Helen Mirren, sorry. That's the real one. That's the real one. In those 35 years, the broad lines of British foreign policy haven't changed all that much. We've consistently worked to make the world a better place. But the list of people we've worked with has changed a fair bit, and I can't imagine many people back in 1972 would have thought that within 3 decades, some of our enemies in the Warsaw Pact would be members of the European Union and amongst our staunchest allies. So there's been quite a lot of change. And there has, of course, been one special relationship throughout that period, and indeed beforehand, that between the UK and the US. And what makes this relationship work so well? Well, of course, we speak the same language. Or do we? George Bernard Shaw said that England and America were 2 countries divided by a common language, and there are just a few examples. Here, it's a little bit dangerous to walk on a pavement. In the UK, we tend to do it all the time. And I hope the one about the cheque and the bill is self-explanatory. And, of course, you drive on the wrong side of the road, and you can't play cricket. But you can play rugby, and congratulations to the USA team for their performance on Saturday against England. England won, but only by 28 points to 10, so well done to USA. Right. Now, none of these little differences get in the way of a good relationship between governments, and the reason for that is quite simple. We share the same values. When Gordon Brown was here for the first time as Prime Minister 6 weeks ago, the visit was scrutinised for any differences of message between him and when Tony Blair came over. And of course there's a difference in style. They're different people, different men. But the underlying principle that drives British government policy is exactly the same. And the UK's relationship with the US remains our single most important bilateral relationship. And most of the problems facing the world today are too big for one country, even a superpower, to tackle alone. So we need partnerships, and that between the UK and the US, I think, is the best I can think of. So what are Britain's policies in the world? Here they are. I shan't be asking questions afterwards, so don't worry too much about that. Nor do I have time to talk about all of them. I'm going to talk about the ones in blue, and that's those three. 3 is a very important number, incidentally, because somebody very wise once wrote that an audience will only remember 3 things the speaker says. The second thing I remember about the number 3 is there are three types of people in the world: those who can count and those who can't. Now, the first priority I want to talk about is sustainable development and poverty reduction, underpinned by human rights, democracy, good governance, and protection of the environment. And I'd like to take Africa as an example, given my own experience there. 5 weeks ago, our district governor, Bill Wolfin, spoke about the generosity of Rotary members and how that can make a big difference to communities in places like Africa to help people with no access to clean water or health services. And I know from my own time in West Africa, and Alec mentioned those countries, 2 of them are at the bottom of the UN Human Development Index, and 1 of them isn't even on the list. The problems faced by Africa are momentous indeed. Now, Africa matters because there are 1 billion fellow human beings on that continent, and its crises cannot be contained within its borders. Sadly, we know that fragile and failed states can be havens for criminals and terrorists. Poor economic performance can lead to a failure in the development of democratic institutions. Stagnating economic development is a strong driver of emigration to Europe and the US. And the battle against HIV/AIDS won't be won in the world if it's lost in Africa, where 2/3 of all deaths from the disease have occurred. And Africa is, of course, rich in resources, a fact not lost on China in particular at the moment. Now, the rich world has given many billions of dollars to poor countries over decades, and progress has varied hugely. African governments must keep their part of the bargain. Good governance is a vital component to success. Legal certainty, anti-corruption, and transparency are essential for investment and growth in any developing country. Now, in 1999, the G8, the group of leading industrial countries, launched a proposal on debt relief for poor countries. This released money to be spent on useful things like schools and healthcare. So, for example, in Zambia in East Africa, cancellation of debt means that the population now has free healthcare for the first time, and spending on education in Mozambique is growing fast. And there's been progress in other areas too. Democracy is now the norm in Africa, and there have been 60 multi-party elections in Africa in the last 5 years. I'd like to mention here the fantastic work that the Carter Center does in promoting democracy in Africa. Africans are now beginning to take responsibility for solving Africa's problems. In 2000, the UN endorsed the Millennium Development Goals, 8 targets to be met by 2015 to help the world's poorest people. This year marks the halfway point, but we're dangerously off track. 6 weeks ago, Gordon Brown, in his first major foreign policy speech as Prime Minister, launched a new partnership between governments and some of the world's largest corporations to re-energize efforts to meet the development goals. He called for a coalition of conscience across the public and private sectors, faith groups, and non-profits. And business has a hugely important part to play, because it is trade, not aid, that will make the biggest difference. Africa's share in global exports in 2005 was less than 3%, despite it accounting for 1/6 of the world's population, roughly equivalent to its 1991 value and less than half its peak value in 1980. A level playing field for international trade will help the world's poor into prosperity. Once African farmers can compete in the global marketplace, they'll be better able to feed their families, send their children to school, and keep them healthy. And that helps us as well as them. It's the old story. You give a man a fish, and he'll eat for a day. You teach him how to fish, he'll never need to be hungry again. But that only works if he has a lake in which to fish. And Africa will suffer the most if the world fails to reduce global warming, with parts of the continent becoming uncultivable or uninhabitable. Gosh, I wasn't looking forward to pronouncing those. So my second theme today is the most pressing issue facing us in the 21st century: global climate change, global climate security. And I say climate security because climate change can no longer be considered simply as an environmental problem. It represents a security and prosperity imperative for all our countries. Science shows us a clearly identifiable process that is changing our climate and our world. We can predict the consequences of that change, and we have the means to take action against it. As temperatures rise, glaciers, or shall I say glaciers, melt. This is Riggs Glacier in Alaska in 1941, and this is what it looks like today. So in 65 years, that's 2,000 feet thick, that ice in the first picture. That's all gone. So glaciers melt and oceans rise. More droughts will mean rivers, lakes, and inland seas drying up, meaning less drinking water, water for irrigation and fishing. And higher sea levels will bring flooding to large parts of the coastlines of Florida and southeast England, amongst other places, not to mention Bangladesh and some Pacific island nations. As many as 200 million people may be forced to move permanently. So climate change is a global threat with global consequences, and we shall all be affected. Now, before you all get too depressed, I'm going to lighten it up a bit now. This was the stark warning contained in last year's Stern report. Now, despite the title, Stern report is not about this guy here. Rather, it's about this guy here, or at least written by him, so Nicholas Stern, who was Britain's chief economic advisor. And he wrote a report on the economics of climate change. And that report estimated that the costs of climate change, if we did nothing about it, would reduce global development, global domestic product by 5%, and perhaps as much as 20%. But starting to tackle the problem now would only cost the world economy about 1%. So the math's pretty straightforward. But we should not and cannot call a halt to economic growth. But nor can we carry on as we are, because if we do, we will worsen climate change and undermine the very basis of our future prosperity and security. So what do we do? There has to be a fundamental change in the way we produce and consume energy. Governments must put in place the long-term frameworks of goals, regulations, and incentives. Business must have the confidence to follow that lead and start switching investment. And consumers must make the right choices and maintain the pressure on others to do the same. And this means all of us here in Atlanta too. I applaud the City of Atlanta and Fulton County for joining the International Cities for Climate Protection. And my office is working closely with the Mayor of Atlanta's office and a number of non-profit organizations working to help the environment. And I see Jim Stokes somewhere. Yes, there. He did an excellent conference last week on energy. I learned a lot, and I've been looking into all this for quite some time. So the George Consultancy does some fantastic work. Now, this picture is the I-75, I-285 interchange in Cobb County, and you can see the heat coming from that area. And Sam Olens reminded us last month that the 4.5 million people of Metro Atlanta own 3.5 million cars and drive nearly 120 million miles a day between them. and that creates 50,000 tons of carbon dioxide that goes into the atmosphere every day. In Georgia as a whole, the population has increased by 40% since 1990, but its energy use has increased by 70% over the same period, nearly twice as much. And that creates an awful lot of carbon. So we all need to think about some lifestyle changes if we are to be serious about helping to reduce the effects of climate change. And we can all make a difference by driving less, carpooling more, using and wasting less energy at home and in the workplace, and by recycling more. And if the US, which accounts for 1/4 of the world's greenhouse gas production, sets a lead, that sets a brilliant example for other people to follow. So the big decisions rest with governments. And tackling climate change can bring countries together if we are wise enough not to let it drive us apart. The G8 summit in Germany in June came up with an agreed way forward for the international community. And the agreement, the aspirational agreement from the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting at the weekend, just 2 days ago, is a step in the right direction. But the UK believes that specific and binding targets for greenhouse gas reduction are needed to make things work. That's what we're doing in Britain, where next month, Parliament will debate a bill which will make it a legal requirement in the UK to reduce greenhouse gas production by something like 30% over the next 15 years. And the UK will be the first country in the world to set such a commitment. In the US, both houses in Congress have been debating plans for action, and the White House has called a conference for the end of this month of the major economies to start work on proposals to set long-term goals for stabilizing carbon dioxide emissions. But here in Georgia, the State House only held its first hearing on the subject 3 weeks ago, and the title was Climate Change, Fact or Fiction. So there may be some catching up to do. The UK supports international efforts to address global warming, but we must ensure that the numerous international processes now underway are complementary. We owe it to ourselves and everybody else to get it right. And my final theme today is terrorism and Islam, with tomorrow's anniversary very much in mind. I want to highlight the importance of separating terrorism and Islam in Western minds. The sheer devastation and loss of life on 9/11 shocked the world. 6 years on, Al-Qaeda is still a dangerous, active, ambitious organization. Many of its leaders have been killed or captured thanks to the efforts of the US and its allies. But the organization still has money, it still has plans, it still trains murderers. And as we saw only a few days ago with the new video of Osama bin Laden, it still has a pretty effective PR organization too. Of course, terrorism isn't a new issue at all. The picture on the top left is of Dawson's Field, which was 1970, when 3 Western airliners were hijacked by the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And bottom left is 1976, I think, so it's been around for a while. Al-Qaeda is also a rallying cry for individuals, cells and organizations who might have no connection with it at all. For them, it provides an ideology and inspiration. And there are going to be times where our troops on the ground have to play a key role. Right now, for example, in Iraq and Afghanistan, where US and British soldiers are being targeted by Al-Qaeda and its allies and fighting them day by day. Just last Wednesday, 2 more British soldiers died in Afghanistan. But the long-term solution to terrorism is not military. We need to respond to the grievances that motivate people to support the terrorists. And if we are to undermine the terrorists' narrative, then we must make clear to them and everyone else that what they are doing is not Islamic, it is criminal. Treating terrorists as criminals rather than enemies robs them of some of their glamour. Those who paint a picture of a British Muslim community thoroughly radicalized and at war with the West are selling a gross and ugly exaggeration. Britain now has 1.6 million Muslims. Muslims are the youngest of Britain's faith groups. Over half of them are under 25 years old. We have vibrant Muslim communities contributing in every area of endeavour. We have Muslims in Britain's list of richest 500, in both houses of Parliament, in sport, and at senior levels in our police forces and armed services. And the guy on the right there is the first Muslim British Army officer to serve on active duty in Afghanistan. But like some other countries with a large Muslim community, Britain is having to address the alienation that some of our young Muslims feel. The vast majority of British Muslims were as shocked and appalled by the bombings of 9/11 and in London in July 2005 as the rest of the country. Only a tiny number are violent extremists. But the attempted attacks in London and Glasgow in June this year show us that it doesn't take many to cause havoc. Muslim communities in Europe are very different to those in the US. The majority of Muslims in Britain have their roots in South Asia, and those in France from North Africa, and those in Germany from Turkey. So Muslims are not all the same, and it's vital to respect the nature of individual Muslim communities if we are to gain their trust. In the UK, this means working with community organisations to support their own work to tackle the threat of violent extremism in local areas, working to strengthen the resilience of faith and community institutions to extremism, and working with those in the mainstream majority, including faith leaders, to ensure that their voices are heard. And we've already seen some positive examples that this is happening. Governments can take a lead, but ordinary citizens have a crucial role to play, as do politicians and journalists, in the language they use, the leadership they give, and the way they behave towards people from different groups, backgrounds, and countries. Now, terrorism is not new, and it's not new to Britain. The UK has suffered from terrorist attacks for decades. Britain lost over 3,000 of its citizens to the IRA. But the sight of a former IRA commander alongside his Protestant former sworn enemy greeting Sonny Perdue and his delegation in Belfast a couple of months ago proves that terrorism can be overcome. Whatever their beliefs, we have to go after the terrorists who have already been radicalised and who are dedicated to hurting us. It's vital to counter the radicalisation of the next generation of terrorists. But there's a dilemma, the balance we strike between security and liberty. We must not sacrifice cherished freedoms. The British government is committed to tackling the extremists within a context of law and respect for human rights. And we need to be careful that by our choice of words, we do not equate Islam and terrorism or make the link any stronger than it needs to be. If you look at statements by British ministers after last year's airliner plot was foiled, or the more recent London and Glasgow incidents, you will see very little mention of Islam or Islamic extremists, because it is criminals that we're after, not Muslims. I'd like to take any questions or comments that you have now. Thank you. Yes. Sir. Thanks for that question, Jay. It's, did you all hear the question? It's about the UK has already set a good example, I'd like to say, in beginning to tackle climate change, and the question was about some of the technologies and techniques we use. It's a range of policies the government has started rolling in the UK, incentives to companies to invest in cleaner technology, to encourage people to install more energy-efficient lighting and heating in their homes and offices. The tax structure is heavily weighted against people with SUVs, particularly in London, for example, where, as you may have heard, the congestion charging plan in central London has cut driving in London by something like 20%. And that's because people now have to pay $16 to drive into central London. The Mayor of London is thinking about making that $300 for people with SUVs. Now, you may or may not like the Mayor of London and his politics, but that will have an effect because people will really think hard about using their SUVs rather than public transport. So it's a range of policies to tackle different parts of the problem. Yes, sir.
Comment about the possibility of a
I think Ireland is now pretty happy the way it is. I mean, the Republic of Ireland, Southern Ireland, if you want to use that term, is one of the most successful economies in Europe. It joined the European Union on the same day as the UK, and it was then the second poorest country in Europe. It is now one of the richest. So it's a stunning example of what the European Union can achieve. The people of Northern Ireland recently elected a new government. We just saw the two leaders of it, the former enemies, working alongside. Ian Paisley, the Protestant, is the First Minister of Northern Ireland. Martin McGuinness, the former IRA commander, is the Deputy First Minister. The two communities want to work together to make a success of Northern Ireland. The IRA declared a ceasefire 10 years ago because they realized they were not going to get what they wanted through the barrel of a gun. They chose democracy. And that's the way it is now. You have democracy in Northern Ireland, you have democracy in Southern Ireland. There are still people who want to see Northern Ireland revert to the Republic. But as long as the majority of people in Northern Ireland want to remain part of the UK, that's the way it'll be. Come on. Somebody asked me about Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Go on. I was hoping you'd ask that. Can we put the projector back on, please? Anyway, I've got a slide here. There we go. That is the set of... you see, I knew this question was going to come up. Those are the 5 economic tests that the euro has to meet before the British government will recommend that the UK joins the eurozone. I'm not an economist, but I don't think we're going to meet any of those very soon, and probably not all 5 of them for a very long time. The political will is there in the government. The political will is not there in the population of the UK. The vast majority of people in the UK are very happy seeing the Queen's head on their money, and I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Yes, sir, in the back there. Okay. The question was, what sort of things is the British government working on to maintain London's preeminence as an international financial centre? It's tremendously competitive now in the international financial markets, and I think up to a point it's inevitable that positions will change over time. I think one of the things that makes London very special is because of its geographical location and time zones. After the Big Bang in 1986, we were the first market to bring in high tech. We've remained at the cutting edge of technology on that. The secondary market in the UK, the AIM, the alternative investment market, which is sort of like NASDAQ in the sense that it attracts high tech companies in particular, is a very easy place to list companies looking for new capital. And I have to say we've benefited in the UK from Sarbanes-Oxley because a number of American companies have now listed in the UK. Not because it's unregulated, but it's a good place to do business. It's an easy place to do business. So I think we've got still quite a few advantages out there. We've run out of time.
One more?
One more? Yeah. Milt.
What's the status or maybe some of the issues of Turkey being accepted into the
European Union, yeah. The question was about Turkish membership of the European Union. Turkey actually applied to join the European Union well over 10 years ago. It was only 2 years ago, under the British presidency of the EU, that it was agreed that negotiations could formally start. And that is effectively still the position. And the issues that Turkey has got to tackle are so huge to meet the test for membership that it's going to take them a long time to get there. There is a strong groundswell of support within the European Union, not everywhere, but a lot of support for Turkish membership, simply because they are extremely important allies. They've been members of NATO for 40 years, so it's not as though they're new members of Europe. They're strategically important given their geographical location. And of course, it's a predominantly Muslim society. And reflecting the way that the UK and other European countries and cultures are going, it makes sense to invite your largest Muslim neighbour to share part of the success. So I think it'll happen, but it won't happen all that quickly.
Hang on a second. Martin, thank you for giving us such a good review of some of the priorities and global perspectives that I think we all found interesting. And thank you for being a part of the Atlanta community and a representative of Her Majesty's government. We are proud to have you with us. As you know so well, we give away a book to the Drew Charter School with your signature in it, which will commemorate your stay with us, and I will not read the title to everybody for that. If you give a pig a pancake.